Happy Monday. We are hosting a special live edition of the Liz Wheeler Show. We are live on X. We are live on YouTube. We are live on Facebook, and it's good to see you. My favorite part of doing the show is when we're able to do these lives because then we can interact throughout the whole show. You can throw what you've heard at me, and I can throw what I've heard at you. We have a lot to talk about today. I feel like I say that every day. It might be the understatement of the year today because this week, in 2 days, today's Monday, on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, RFK Jr. will have his confirmation hearing before the Senate, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And to say the attacks against him are ramping up, well, you haven't seen anything yet until you see what's about to hit RFK Jr. The big pharma attacks are in the holding pen. They're waiting to be unleashed. And what we're going to do today is I'm going to walk you through exactly what Big Pharma has planned for RFK Jr., what their strategy is, and how we can combat it. Because I want to be very clear here. We cannot successfully make America great again unless we also make America healthy again. I will be devastated, in other words, if RFK Jr. is not confirmed in the Senate. He has a pretty wide margin. He can have 3 Republicans, in addition to all of the Democrats, vote no on his hearing, and he can still be confirmed. He doesn't need the entire Republican coalition, but he ought to get it. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about what's happening in Colombia, because let's just say what Trump has unleashed on the Colombian president is going to look like child's play compared to what's going to be unleashed on GOP senators if they defy Trump's nomination of RFK Jr. as Health and Human Services Secretary. But it is worth noting the anatomy of what President Trump did to the Colombian president, because this is not just a fun, savage troll that President Trump pulled off on Truth Social from the golf course, which of course makes it awesome. This is a signal to the entire world. The entire world is on notice because what Trump did to the Colombian president, everyone else in the world should worry that that will happen to them, and worse if they try to defy President Trump's mandate for his America First agenda. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Also, Trump's ever increasing list of executive orders. He has a couple new ones today, which are just some of the best. We're going to talk about that and the immigration raids. You know, one of the things that I assume the Trump administration has been involved in this. When I say I assume, they certainly have been involved in this. But one of the ways that the Trump administration has made these mass deportation raids successful is by preventing the propaganda from the left before it started. And they've done this in a very deliberate way. I'm going to show you exactly how they're preventing false narratives from taking hold. Like remember the false narratives down at the border where the Border Patrol agents on horses were swinging their reins, to make the horse move. But the mainstream media claimed that they were whipping migrants with those reins. Well, the Trump administration is not going to allow that type of false narrative to happen again, and they're already showing us exactly how they're preventing those narratives from taking hold. So we're going to talk about that later in the show. And then we're going to talk about Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni. I know some of you guys are probably like, what? Who wants to talk about Hollywood? Well, I actually don't always want to talk about Hollywood, but this story, first of all, what happens in Hollywood, it's kind of like it's the petri dish of wokeism. What happens in Hollywood is then exported to our culture, which is exported to politics. And this interaction, these lawsuits between Blake Lively, famous actress, and Justin Baldoni, her co-star in the wildly successful movie It Ends With Us, this is a playbook that the left is writing, the woke left is writing, that's this close to being exported to your husband, your workplace, your neighborhood, if we don't recognize this playbook and put a stop to it. So yeah, we do have to talk about Hollywood for a couple of minutes. Even if you don't know who Blake Lively was, fun fact, this morning I say to my husband, hey, are you following the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni thing? And he goes, who's Blake Lively? And he wasn't joking. He was being serious. So if you're that person, that's okay. There's still something really important to be learned from this story, which we need to learn in order to protect our society from people like Blake Lively. All that and more today on the Liz Wheeler Show. Okay. The RFK hearing is set to happen on Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. I can't wait. I'm going to be glued to my television, or I'll probably watch it on X, actually. I'll be glued to my phone watching this hearing. It's going to be something like we've never seen. And confirmation hearings can be pretty spicy. I mean, the Hegseth hearing a couple of weeks ago was pretty spicy. That's going to be nothing compared to the RFK hearing, because Big Pharma has a tactic that they are unleashing as we speak against RFK to try to take him down. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But if RFK actually does get into HHS, I'm praying. Literally say your prayers. Do you think that the left is going to try another pandemic or their quademic? Do you think they're going to try to unleash that on us to try to stop Trump's agenda? Will they try to restrict ivermectin again? That would be a very real emergency. Now, I don't know exactly how that public health establishment will try to get us, but I know that they will. Emergencies don't wait, and neither do the globalists that cause the emergencies, which means that having the right resources matters. Having access to things like ivermectin is so important. That's why All Family Pharmacy offers over 200 different medications and bundled emergency packages to ensure that you are ready for anything. At the heart of this effort is the Make America Healthy Again movement, a call to take control of your health and prepare for the unexpected. And if you find yourself in a pinch, All Family Pharmacy has you covered with overnight delivery. That is care and convenience when you need it most. So go check out allfamilypharma.com/Liz. And because you are part of this movement, use code Liz10 at checkout for an exclusive discount. Again, that's allfamilypharma.com/Liz, code Liz10. Your health is your responsibility. Let All Family Pharmacy help you take charge of it today. Don't wait around for Fauci to screw you over. That's allfamilypharma.com/Liz, code Liz10. Okay, we're going to talk about the Colombian president and this so-called trade war. You know, the leftists might not get their coffee and might not get their flower bouquets for Valentine's Day. That's what they're most worried about when Trump imposed 25% tariffs that would increase to 50% tariffs if the Colombian president, a communist, did not allow flights of deported Colombian citizens, criminals, to land in Colombia. Of course, Trump won that fight. And we're going to talk about the savage tactic that he used and why everyone who is set to resist Trump around the world, well, they're on notice. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but that whole thing is going to seem like child's play compared to what will happen if Republican senators defy Trump's nomination of RFK Jr. You are on tap. That's the message for the day. You are on tap. The Big Pharma assault against RFK Jr. has begun. The Wall Street Journal editorial board published an op-ed this weekend called Why RFK Jr. is Dangerous to Public Health. Their subtitle says he's made millions from referring clients to trial lawyers, and he advocates mass tort litigation that would ruin the vaccine industry. Of all the despicable subheadlines, this one takes the cake. He advocates mass tort litigation. What does that mean? That's a euphemism for something. What is the Wall Street Journal editorial board trying to say? What they're trying to say is RFK Jr. supports removing the liability protections that shield vaccine manufacturers from any responsibility if they create a product that harms a child. So if a child gets a vaccine and that child is harmed, the vaccine industry has no accountability. They don't have any responsibility for their own product. This is RFK Jr.'s stance on it. He thinks it's awful, which it is. Take a listen.
What I would do is I would get rid of that immunity. I would lift the immunity and make them accountable and make them responsible, because that's the only way to ensure the safety of this product. They haven't paid anything with vaccines because vaccines are immune from liability. So you cannot, no matter how negligent that company is, no matter how reckless they are, no matter how grievous your injury, you can't sue them.
Name any other healthcare related anything where this same principle applies. You can't, because it doesn't exist. So what happened is back in the 1980s, President Ronald Reagan signed a law because vaccine manufacturers were twisting his arm. Vaccine manufacturers knew that some of their products were not safe. They wanted to continue to sell them anyway because they profited from them. And so they went to the President of the United States and they threatened him. They said, vaccines have saved millions of lives. Vaccines cause herd immunity. People will die if children in this country aren't forced to take our vaccines. But we're going to pull our vaccines from market and you're going to be responsible. People are going to look to you and say it was under the Reagan administration that the vaccines stopped because President Reagan didn't do anything. And they threatened President Reagan. And so President Reagan signed a piece of legislation into law that gave vaccine manufacturers liability from any harm that their products caused to people. So vaccine manufacturers lost the incentive to make sure that their products were safe at all. Why on earth, unless you are a scrupulous, ethical, good, moral person, why would a company that's run by unscrupulous, unethical, evil, immoral people care if their products harm people if they don't have any responsibility for that? And RFK Jr. is suggesting that why don't we give that liability back to the manufacturers as a market incentive for them to develop safer vaccines that have fewer side effects and fewer injuries? Is that such an insane idea? Do you disagree with that? Well, evidently the Wall Street Journal does, because Big Pharma is freaking out. This is going to be, mark my words, the next 48 to 72 hours is going to be an all-out war. There was between Big Pharma and you. RFK Jr. is simply your representative in this fight. This war is truthfully between you and your family and Big Pharma. There was a petition that made headlines all around the country. 17,000 doctors signed a petition warning against RFK Jr., that saying that he was dangerous, saying that as medical doctors trained in the care of people, that RFK Jr. would be terrible for this position. Well, you know what? That petition was fake. That petition was so fake that someone, one of you, went onto that petition and said, I'm a doctor, I'm going to sign this, and signed Dr. Fake, and they accepted Dr. Fake as part of that signature because it was astroturfing. It was a lie. It was an attempt by the left to pretend that this coalition, this consensus of experts were warning against RFK. But it was a lie. It was a lie. RFK Jr. is one of the most popular politicians, political figures in our country, and the margin isn't even close. There's a reason that moment when RFK Jr. walked out on stage and shook hands with Donald Trump, and the MAGA movement was married to the Maha movement, that's a moment that lives in our hearts, because it's a moment that we felt hope, that we felt like all these years being gaslit and being told that vaccines are safe, that no one's injured, that autoimmune diseases and cancer and autism and SIDS and allergies and ADHD, that these skyrocketing rates of these illnesses that didn't used to have these enormous epidemic level numbers, we were gaslit and told we were crazy for thinking that these have increased. They're just diagnosed more now, is what we're told. Well, let's just talk about what's going to happen in the Senate. Big Pharma spends an incredible amount of money lobbying senators, not just Democrat senators. The top 20 recipients of the most Big Pharma cash in the United States Senate, 9 of those senators, 9 of the top 20 are Republican senators. And I want to read you the list of the names of those senators and the amount of money that they receive, because if you live in a state and this is your senator, I want you to be ready to pick up the phone. I want you to be ready to send an email. I want you to be ready to tag your senator on X publicly. And we'll talk about exactly how to do that in just a moment. But of the top 20 recipients of the most pharma cash in the United States Senate, the Republicans, the 9 Republicans who are on that list, Senator Marsha Blackburn of the state of Tennessee received, and this, by the way, is only in 2024. This isn't even lifetime. In the lifetime amount of money that these senators have received from pharma, we're talking the tune of millions and millions and millions of dollars. So in 2024 alone, Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee received $316,656 from Big Pharma. Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana received $290,375 from Big Pharma in 2024 alone. Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming, $204,000 in 2024. Senator Tom Tillis, $131,955 in 2024 alone. This, by the way, amount of money, this is significantly more than the average salary of the American people. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas received $101,000 from Big Pharma in 2024. Senator Mike Crapo of Idaho received $97,000 from Big Pharma in 2024. Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina received $79,000 from Big Pharma in 2024. And by the way, guys, in the live chat, if this is your senator, if you live in any of these states, raise your hand. Tell me that you are going to reach out to them. Senator Roger Marshall of Kansas received $74,875 in 2024 alone from Big Pharma. Senator Rick Scott of Florida received $70,924,000 in 2024 alone from Big Pharma. This, my friends, so that's 2024 alone. If you zoom out to other Republican senators who have received the most amount from Big Pharma over the course of their lifetime career in the Senate are Senator James Lankford and Senator Mitch McConnell. That one should surprise no one. These senators are, as we speak, behind the scenes, in the middle of one of the most intense pressure campaigns of their lifetime. Big Pharma lobbyists, from the actual executives at big pharma companies to those that they hire to speak to these senators on their behalf, to pretend grassroots, which is individuals that are actually acting at the behest of big pharma lobbyists, coming to these senators' offices and telling sob stories that would favor big pharma. They are under one of the most intense pressure campaigns of their careers. And that's what they care about most, their careers. Not every senator on the list that I read is an iffy one on RFK Jr., but most of them are. RFK Jr. can afford to lose no more than 3 Republican senators, assuming that all Democrats vote no. Remember what happened in the Hegseth hearing? All the Democrats voted no, and then 3 Republicans, Collins, Murkowski, and McConnell, also voted no. And so Vice President J.D. Vance was the tiebreaker. And Hegseth was confirmed just by a nail biter, 51-50, thanks to that vice presidential tie-breaking vote. So what are these senators going to do? If this is how much money they're pocketing from Big Pharma, and the man who wants to destroy Big Pharma's corruption is what they're voting on. Senators Collins and Murkowski, I'll have you remember, voted in favor of confirming Biden's appointment for Deputy Secretary of HHS, Rachel Levine. Rachel Levine lived over 50 years as a man. Rachel Levine supported transing your children without your parental permission. Rachel Levine is a pervert and a creep. Senator Susan Collins of Maine and Senator Murkowski of Alaska voted in favor of Rachel Levine. Information that it's important that you know. Remember Murkowski's history. Murkowski's history in the United States Senate, Lisa Murkowski, and this is according to DC Drano, Lisa Murkowski was appointed by her governor daddy to the Senate. Oh, that's right. She wasn't actually elected. This is nepotism. Murkowski voted with Obama 72.3% of the time back in 2013. So she's not a Republican. She's certainly not a conservative. She's a rhino of the highest order. She refused to support Brett Kavanaugh for Supreme Court justice. She voted to convict Trump in his second impeachment, the one about Ukraine, where he simply asked Zelensky about the Biden criminal family cartel, the crimes that they were committing in Ukraine. That one, the one that turned out to be true. And we knew it was true at the time, but then it was proved true when Biden pardoned his criminal family. That's the history of Lisa Murkowski. And it's important that Lisa Murkowski know that we know her history. We know that the people of Alaska didn't pick Murkowski. Her dad picked her. Her dad picked her. Between the years 2016 and 2022, this is what Big Pharma has planned for RFK Jr. The top 10 pharma firms in the United States and abroad gave $29 million to Democrats and $24 million to Republicans. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for these senators to look at and say, oh, yeah, no, I'm good. I'm just going to vote for RFK Jr. anyway. They are under the most intense pressure that they have ever experienced in their life. What's at stake here? Fauci, another Fauci. COVID, lockdowns, masking, vaccine mandates, big pharma, autism, autoimmune, cancer, obesity, food, unless you fight back. It's big pharma versus you. You're the one that's been harmed. You're the one that's been gaslit. You're the one that's suffering. So let your senator know. Let your senator know. Tell your senator to walk to the office of Iowa Senator Joni Ernst and ask her, how did it feel, Senator Ernst, to have the wrath of MAGA The righteous wrath of MAGA turned on you when you threatened to defy Trump's appointment of Hegseth as defense secretary. How did it feel to all of a sudden understand the fragility of your power in the Senate? Because let me tell you, you have the power to change the minds of these senators. Big Pharma's powerful and they have a lot of money, and money is a powerful incentive to these senators. But you are more powerful than that because you hold in your hand the currency which is more valuable than money to these senators. You hold their seat. And they need to fear for that seat. They need to understand that we're not just issuing empty threats of voting them out of office if they don't comply with how we want them to represent us. They need to understand that their political career is over, finished, forever, if they defy an RFK Jr. confirmation vote in the Senate. And so pick up your phone, call your senator, open your email on your phone, on your laptop, on your computer, send an email every hour on the hour until your senator votes to confirm RFK Jr. to the United States Senate. Go on X at this moment and tag your senator. Tell your stories. Do you have a child that was injured? Did you have a vaccine side effect yourself? Do you have autism in your family? ADHD, an autoimmune disorder, heart disease, obesity, cancer, anything related to the corruption of Big Pharma and Big Food? Tell your story. Post a picture of your face. Tell your story. Tag your senator. Tag me. Elevate these stories and make your voice louder than the jingling of that cash from the Big Pharma lobbyists. It's the only way. The only way. We're less than 48 hours until this hearing in the United States Senate. Less than 48 hours. Their staff, the United States senators, their staff hate getting your calls, but they all talk about it. They talk amongst themselves. Democrats talk to Democrat staff. Republican staff talks to Republican staff. Democrat staff talks to Republican staff, and vice versa. Our office is getting creamed with these calls. It makes a difference in how your senator votes. They work. We know it works. So now it's incumbent on you to put that pressure on the United States Senate to make sure they understand that they will vote to confirm RFK Jr. to the United States Senate. Otherwise, what Donald Trump did to the president of Colombia, who refused to allow planes full of Colombian criminals who were in our country illegally land in his country, what happened to him will be child's play compared to what happens to the career of any senator who defies Trump's nomination of RFK Jr. We're going to post all over my social media in the description of this episode links. If you don't have the phone number to your senator, if you don't have their email address, if you don't have their account, their X account, we're going to post. We're going to make it easy. We're going to post it all over my social media so that you can make your voice heard. Tag me on Instagram, tag me on X, tag me. I will elevate your voice. I'll be a megaphone for your story. Tag me so that we can get the word to these senators just how serious this situation is, that amount of money, no matter how much it seems to us, is nothing compared to what they're going to experience if they don't vote for RFK Jr. I'll be blunt with you. I like money too. I like being in control of my money. So my husband and I chatted and we said, hey, let's figure out how we can maximize our wealth and savings, but the honest way. Trump won't be here forever. For Pete's sake, we could be debanked just because we're conservative. We got to find some protection for the long run. And we took action. My husband reorganized our assets. We now have a portion of our portfolio in physical precious metals, like the gold and silver type. I highly recommend that you call the only precious metals dealer that I trust, American Hartford Gold. They'll show you how to protect your savings, your retirement accounts by diversifying your wealth portfolio with physical gold and silver. They have the finest products, amazing customer service, and a buyback commitment. And American Hartford Gold is one of my favorite companies because they support content like this. They stand side by side with us. They're committed to bringing you the truth. Tell them that I sent you. They'll give you up to $15,000 of free silver on your first order. So call them now. Click the link in the description of this episode, or call 866-996-5172. That's 866-996-5172, or text Liz to 998899. All right, let's talk about the Colombian the I call it the Colombian scandal here, because this is, I mean, it was one of the most fun stories to watch unfold, but it is also one of the most critically important political events of the entire Trump presidency. The whole world is on notice because of what Trump was posting on Truth Social while he was on a cart on the golf course, which just makes it more awesome. I want to look at a couple of your live chats. Daniel says, and after RFK, we still have Cash and Tulsi. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. On Thursday, we have Cash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard at 9:30 and 10 a.m. respectively, I believe, in the United States Senate. We will get to both of them later this week. Today, we focus on RFK Jr. because his is going to be the most difficult confirmation because of the money. It's not just the deep state that is against RFK Jr., like maybe they are against Tulsi and against Cash Patel, but the money of Big Pharma is against RFK Jr. as well. Okay. Let's talk about Colombia. Were you guys watching this? Were you waiting with bated breath to see what Donald Trump was going to post next as he was in between putting at, what was it, the 6th or 7th hole that he sent out, the blistering notice to the Colombian president that we would not only revoke visa access for Colombian residents and officials here in the United States, but Trump would be imposing a 25% tariff on all imported Colombian goods here into the United States. Then that 25% would increase to 50% just as long as the Colombian president refused to accept plane loads. What was it? 2 or 3 plane loads of Colombian illegal aliens, meaning Colombians who had illegally entered our country, who were criminals, who Trump and his people had rounded up and were sending back to Colombia. And that's the crux of this, right? President Trump was given an incredible mandate when we elected him. We told him with our vote, fix the crisis at the border, not just build a wall. Fix the crisis of illegal immigration that includes all of the illegal immigrants who are in our country because of what Biden did. And so Trump, of course, promised not just to build a wall, but he promised mass deportations. He said that's going to start on Tuesday. I'm sworn in on Monday. On Tuesday, Tom Homan, border czar, is going to start mass deportations. And that's exactly what happened. We watched last week a video of ICE in Boston arresting a Haitian gang member and another MS-13 gang member, both of whom cursed Trump and thanked Biden and Obama, respectively, for allowing them to be in the United States. They were not only, one of them had 17 criminal convictions, the other was a murderer. Well, President Trump and Tom Homan put illegal aliens from Colombia, illegal aliens who were criminals from Colombia, on airplanes, sending them back to Colombia, and the Colombian president refused to let those planes land in his country. The gall. Gustavo Petro, president of Colombia, who, by the way, is a communist, like an actual communist, refused to let these planes land. And my first question is just, wait, why doesn't Colombia want this plane load of their own nice citizens back? These lovely migrants, these people that just mind their own business and contribute to society, these family-oriented folks. Why doesn't Colombia want them? Why wouldn't they let 3 plane loads of people? That's nothing for a bunch of nice people, right? This is what the left tells us. The left tells us that all of these illegal aliens, they just want a better life. They just want to be Americans too. No. President Gustavo Petro rejected these plane loans of Colombian criminals because that's what they are. They're criminals. They're criminals. And even a communist doesn't want criminals like that in his country. Even a communist like that doesn't want criminals in his country. However, he misjudged exactly who he was dealing with. He misjudged President Trump. President Trump said, oh, you have no idea what we will unleash on you if you refuse to take these criminals back into your country. So let's talk about the practicality here for a second. 20% of Colombia's GDP comes from exports, of which 27% goes to the United States. So the Colombian economy relies entirely on the United States, which means it's almost pathetic for Colombia to think that they can say no to the United States on anything. It's like a child to a parent. They have no authority, no power, no autonomy, nothing. They are entirely under Any freedom that they have is just our generosity, our benevolence, as the Colombian president would soon find out. When President Trump said, "Well, I'm going to impose these tariffs on you," Gustavo Petro says, "Well, I'm gonna impose tariffs back on you. I'm gonna impose tariffs on coffee and flowers." And believe it or not, this is actually the narrative that the left picked up. The Democrat response, I want to read you this response specifically from this Kamala Harris influencer named Harry Sisson. He said, "Colombia supplies 27% of America's coffee and a huge portion of our cut flowers, roots, bulbs, and more, with Valentine's Day just 18 days away. Get ready for your morning coffee and Valentine's Day celebration to be far more expensive." Oh, well, golly, Harry. $1 more for coffee, but rapists off the street. Sounds like an okay trade to me. See, that's the thing. That's the thing. What the libs are telling us is they would rather have rapists and murderers assaulting our young women here in the United States than lose access to their medium roast. Or not even lose access to it, have to pay $1 more for their medium roast. This is the brilliance of how President Trump is conducting his mass deportations. The brilliance is that he holds all the power over countries like Colombia. He has a mandate from us, and he has the media on his side. Not the mainstream media, but no one cares about the mainstream media anymore. He has the media that matters on his side. He has media that's actually reporting on the truth. And what I mean by this, think about Boston on that first day. Think about the Haitian immigrant and the murderer, the MS-13 murderer. You can picture them. Why? Because there was a Fox reporter embedded with ICE during that raid, capturing the footage so that the propaganda never stood a chance. The propagandists couldn't say families separated, young people seeking a future, women sent back to where they're going to be sexually assaulted. No, 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 no. Those fake news narratives never had a chance to take hold because simultaneously with the headline of ICE raids in Boston, bam, came the videos from Fox. Likewise, in Chicago. In Chicago, Tom Homan's first arrest was a sex offender from Thailand. And how do we know this? Because Dr. Phil was embedded with Tom Homan the entire day. President Trump's team knows what it's doing. Their team understands the mainstream media and understands that you don't just counter the mainstream media's lies with truth. You don't just say, "Oh, you're lying. Let me prove to you. Let me debunk your factlessness." No, no, you never give them a chance to propagate those lies by driving the narrative first yourself. And this is the difference between President Trump in 2016 and President Trump in 2024. There's this joke that goes around on X. It's been going around on X pretty much every day since Trump's inauguration last week that says, actually, maybe it's a good thing that the election was stolen from Trump in 2020. Because who Trump was in 2020 compared to who Trump is in 2024, I'll take who Trump is in 2024 every time. So if we lost those 4 years, but we got in return this savage-based version of Trump, maybe we won. Maybe we came out on top in the end after all. Because President Trump's team understands exactly what the media's playbook is. Exactly what the media's playbook is. And so think about how they've conducted this political orchestra. Not only did they outsmart the mainstream media here at home in Boston and in Chicago after having won the mandate of our vote, telling President Trump, yeah, this is what we want. The majority of the American people want criminal aliens to be deported. They're going after criminals first to make sure that even the Democrats who also want, the Democrat voters, I should say, who also want criminal aliens to be deported are on board with the beginning of these mass deportations. Not only have they structured that, they've embedded these reporters, this media within the raids so that they're setting the narrative and the media just, what can the media say? The media goes, I'm opposed to this. I'd rather have a rapist in my daughter's college town if I don't have to pay $1 more for coffee. What can they say? At the same time, President Trump demonstrates to the world the power of the United States. I've said for a long time that the United States' greatest power in the world, our greatest negotiating power, isn't actually our military strength. We don't want to get into any more wars unless we were existentially threatened militarily. We don't want to. We don't want to drop bombs on people, except maybe like a targeted terrorist here or there. We don't want some large scale war. So using our military as a deterrent only goes as far as it's a threat that we would follow through on. No. Our greatest negotiating strength is our economy. Because there's not a country in the world that wants to go without the United States economy. Our economy is the backbone of the entire world. And countries like Colombia know it. And we just showed the world, not just Colombia. He obviously got the best of the Colombian president. It's not too difficult to get the best of a communist if you acknowledge that he's a communist. It's also not too easy to get, it's not too difficult, I should say, to get the best of someone like Gustavo Petro, who is not just a communist, he's also a weirdo. There was a Daily Mail report a couple years ago that he cheated on his wife, which is bad enough, but with an open known sort of famous transgender, like a man who's pretending to be a woman. So I don't think President Trump was super intimidating or super intimidated trying to negotiate with Gustavo Petro. I think he knew that he could handle him. He could handle a guy like that. Yeah, I don't think a guy like that is very difficult to emerge victorious after in a negotiation like this. And all the while, as President Trump is conducting this political orchestra, he is using the Colombian president to signal to the rest of the world, if you defy me, if you disobey my orders, if you put America in a position that is not America first, you will suffer because you come second to us. In fact, it's a message that I think Egypt and Jordan should take note. The Trump administration has suggested to both Egypt and Jordan that they take Palestinian refugees from Gaza into their country. Both Egypt and Jordan have rejected the Trump administration's idea, and perhaps both countries should think twice before rejecting a suggestion from President Trump, given the amount of foreign aid that both countries receive from us every year, particularly Jordan, whose safety is only because we choose for them to be safe and funded entirely by the American people. But whether it's European welfare queens, whether it's Zelensky, whether it's Colombian president who doesn't want criminal aliens to come back into his country, whether it's Egypt and Jordan, the world should take note because this power play from President Trump is a signal to the entire world that Trump and his 47th administration, it's not messing around. This is the tone for the entire administration. Okay. Trump executive orders. This is from today only. It's hard to keep track. It's like I saw this meme on X of that I Love Lucy episode where she and Ethel are at the chocolate factory. There's supposed to be quality control, like checking the chocolates as they come along the conveyor belt, and they can't keep up. And so Lucy just starts shoving them in her mouth and then shoving them down her dress. It's classic I Love Lucy episode. And someone posted that and was like, me trying to keep track of all of Trump's executive orders. It's exactly right. That's how I feel over here. A couple executive orders to note. President Trump signed an executive order that reestablishes military members who were thrown out of the military for refusing the COVID jab. He will, like Pete Hegseth says, or he's set to sign this yet. It's going to happen this week. He will. And he's going to reinstate them with back pay. That's what I like to hear. So it wasn't just Hegseth making this statement. It is President Trump saying that he will do that. He is also set to sign an order that will ban military members for using taxpayer dollars to get gender transition surgeries. Well, it's about dang time. It's about dang time that people who wanted to mutilate their genitals in the name of radical gender ideology were actually joining the military because taxpayer dollars would fund their transgender surgeries. If that isn't the most horrendous thing that you've ever heard, I don't know. I don't know what is. Okay, these are just a couple of the just a couple of the executive orders to keep an eye out for. There's also an executive order. President Trump is set to establish an Iron Dome for the United States. We're going to talk more about that, about what that actually entails and whether this is a good use of taxpayer money or whether this feeds the military industrial complex. That we're going to save for a later show. You can drop it in the comments, the live chat, and let me know what you think about that. What you think about that. JD Vance. JD Vance has set the tone for this might be like the catchphrase of the entire Trump administration now. He went on the mainstream media. He did an interview with Margaret Brennan, who is obviously a radical leftist, mainstream media Trump hater, and she was pushing back on these mass deportations, and this is what JD Vance said to her. Take a listen.
When you talked to us in August, you said, I don't think we should abandon anybody who's been properly vetted and helped us. Do you stand by that?
Well, Margaret, I don't agree that all these immigrants or all these refugees have been properly vetted. In fact, we know that there are cases of people who allegedly were properly vetted and then were literally planning terrorist attacks on our country. That happened during the campaign, if you may remember. So clearly not all of these foreign nationals
but there are
have been properly
30,000
vetted.
people in the pipeline, Afghan refugees.
But my primary
Do you stand by
concern
it?
as the vice president, Margaret, is to look after the American people. And now that
So
we
no.
know that we have vetting problems with a lot of these refugee programs, we absolutely cannot unleash thousands of unvetted people into our country.
These
It's
people are
not
vetted.
good.
These people are vetted.
Just like the guy who planned a terrorist attack in Oklahoma a few months ago, he was allegedly properly vetted, and many people in the media and the Democratic Party said that he was properly vetted. Clearly he wasn't. I don't want my children to share a neighborhood with people who are not properly vetted, and because I don't want it for my kids, I'm not going to force any other American citizens' kids to do that either.
No, and that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I think most Americans agree with me.
We'll be back in 1 minute with more of our interview with Vice President Vance.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't really care, Margaret. I make no apologies for the fact that I'm probably going to say that about 20 times in every show from now. From henceforward. I don't really care, Margaret. I don't really care, Margaret. Best line ever. Make America great again? Great, but move over for I don't really care, Margaret. Okay, Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni. This is... Let me preface this. For those of you who don't care about Hollywood or don't even know who these people are, let me preface this by saying that I was talking to my husband in an elevator earlier today, and I said, hey, are you following the Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni drama? And he goes, who's Blake Lively? And I was like, I thought he was kidding. I was like, you're joking right now, right? And he goes, is Blake a boy or a girl? And I was like, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So if that's you, that's okay. You don't have to know who Blake Lively is or Justin Baldoni. I actually didn't even know who Justin Baldoni was until a couple of months ago because I don't watch a lot of movies. If you don't know who these people are, this is still a critically important story because this is a Hollywood story that is this close to having overflow into politics, which means overflow into culture, which means it's going to impact your life and my life. So here's what happened. Blake Lively is a famous Hollywood actress. She starred in a really famous Hollywood actress, like one of the A-list Hollywood actresses. Gorgeous, gorgeous woman. I think she's maybe around my age, a couple years older. She starred in a movie called It Ends With Us in 2024, and it was a wildly successful movie. I didn't see it. It was based on a book written by a woman named Colleen Hoover. Colleen Hoover writes like kind of those chick lit beach read over too much graphic sex, always some weird kind of dark undertones to them. I don't read them. She starred in this movie. Blake Lively starred in this movie with Justin Baldoni. And like I said, I had actually not heard of Justin Baldoni until this movie. I didn't see this movie, but I did see this story as it was happening. But I just want to give you the background here. So Blake Lively is married to Ryan Reynolds. You probably do know who Ryan Reynolds is because, Ryan Reynolds is Ryan Reynolds. He's in the Marvel universe. Deadpool, right? I'm not too familiar with all of that. But I do know who Ryan Reynolds. Yeah, Deadpool. My team's telling me I got that right. Good, I got that right. Even I know who that is. Okay, so Blake Lively filed a civil rights complaint against Justin Baldoni after this movie was released, alleging sexual harassment and sexual misconduct from Justin Baldoni. Now, a civil rights complaint is different than a lawsuit. So this was just with the California Civil Rights Board. But how do we know about it then? How do we know about this story if this was a private complaint filed with the California Civil Rights? Well, the reason that we know about this is because the day after Blake Lively filed this complaint against Justin Baldoni, the New York Times wrote a big profile about this. Now, just for informational purposes, some of the allegations that Blake Lively made against Justin Baldoni, we have no idea if any of this is true or not. And also, I am predisposed to believe nobody in stories like this because it's Hollywood. Everyone's a pervert in Hollywood. Everyone's creepy in Hollywood. Everyone's sexually promiscuous. Everyone's woke and reads into too much. Everyone wants to be a victim and famous. Everyone's just weird. So predisposed to A, not care about this story at all, and B, I don't have any predisposition to believe one person or the other. But some of the things that Blake Lively alleges against Justin Baldoni is that he barged into her trailer while she was breastfeeding without her permission, that he showed her pornography on his phone, or maybe this was his assistant director showed her pornography on his phone against her will, and she had to walk away from it in order to avoid it. That Blake Lively also alleges that Justin Baldoni made comments about her weight. She was newly postpartum. She'd just given birth. Made comments about her weight and even made phone calls to her private coach, talking about, hey, can she lose weight in a couple weeks because I have to do a lift with her in the movie and, she's too heavy. I might hurt myself. Blake alleges that Justin Baldoni riffed during intimate scenes in the movie, meaning he went off script during sex scenes, and she thought that was some kind of sexual harassment. She felt that he broke character during these sex scenes and was just doing sexual things to her instead of the character doing it to her character. And then she made a really, really serious allegation against him that he made inappropriate overtures towards an underage character in the movie. So these are the allegations that Blake Lively made against Justin Baldoni in this civil rights complaint. Sounds bad, some of them. Sounds messy. Up to this point, I got to tell you, as this story was unfolding in the news, up to this point, I didn't really care that much about this story. I was like, okay, well, creeps be creeps, whatever. However, then I saw an interview that Blake Lively did in which she was asked, this was part of the PR for this film. Now, this film, by the way, the story of this film is about a woman who is the victim of an abusive marriage. Her husband at the time is violent. He commits domestic violence against her. She keeps returning to him. That's why the title of this movie, It Ends With Us, it's about how she finally gets away from this domestic abuser. It's about domestic violence. Like I said, Colleen Hoover's books have this sort of chick lit type of rom-com vibe, but they also deal with these really heavy, nasty topics. So in this interview for this movie, the interviewer asks Blake, hey, if a young woman approached you and was in the situation that your character was in the movie, meaning the victim of domestic violence, what would you give to that young woman? Now, the interviewer was probably expecting Blake to say, like, oh, I'd give her a crisis number, a phone number to call, or I'd tell her, like, don't let yourself be abused, don't return to that abuser. But Blake Lively said nothing of the sort. I watched this interview, just my mouth dropped open because Blake Lively said, what would I give her? Like, my address? Like, my phone number? Like, what? And she was just an absolute brat. Like, not only was she a brat, she was a brat in a really heavy moment, acting completely dismissingly towards women who have been a victim of domestic violence. And I was like, whoa, what the heck? Like, I always thought Blake Lively, I never really thought about her, but I guess I always thought, like, oh, she's sweet and pretty. She has nice blonde hair, pretty face, like in chick flick movies. Cool. She's nice. She's friends with Taylor Swift, so maybe I should have thought a little more about it. But then after I saw that interview, I was like, oh, she seems like kind of a diva. She seems like kind of a brat, like kind of a nasty person. Then I'm not the only one that thought this, because then old interviews Blake Lively has done throughout the years in which she was also very bratty began to surface. And there was, Tim, do we have the old interview, the Congrats on the Bump one? There was an old interview that she had done a couple years ago. Yeah, if you have that, pull that up. I'm gonna explain what it is first. But there was an old interview that she had done in which she was, I guess, pregnant during this interview, and the interviewer opened the interview by saying, Blake, congrats on the little bump. And this is how Blake Lively responded to that. Take a listen to this. You can play that, Tim. Okay, we're gonna bring this up, but I'll explain to you what she says. So this woman that you see frozen on the screen right now, she says, oh, there we go.
First of all, congrats on your little bump.
Congrats on your little bump.
What about my bump? Blake Lively is.
Now the interviewer who said congrats on your little bump was referencing Blake Lively's pregnancy. Blake Lively and her husband, Ryan Reynolds, had publicly announced that she was pregnant. So this was not, an inappropriate intrusion into somebody's personal life in any way. And Blake Lively says, oh, and congrats on your bump. Well, this interviewer was not pregnant and didn't have a baby bump. In fact, this interviewer at the time was struggling with infertility. And as someone who struggled with infertility before my first daughter, I actually, before this interviewer came out and publicly said, yeah, during that interview, I felt like I was shanked because I was struggling with infertility. I could have guessed that because I recognized the look on her face. She blanched when Blake Lively rudely said, congrats on your bump. This interviewer was not pregnant. She was struggling with infertility, and she looked like someone had ripped her heart out. And Blake Lively goes on. The woman the interviewer very graciously moves past it and says, the costumes in this period movie are amazing. Did you enjoy wearing them? And Blake Lively responds and says, I wonder if you would ask the same question to a man. Just the epitome, the definition of a brat. So here we have this girl who everyone kind of thought was like the girl next door. She's married to Ryan Reynolds. She has babies all the time. Like, isn't she cute? All of a sudden people are like, oh, wait, she's actually like a witch. She's actually like a bratty person. And this became very bad PR for her at the time that It Ends With Us was doing its advertising rounds. And so It Ends With Us, this movie, hired a crisis PR firm to try to combat some of this bad press, because obviously a big part of the success of the movie is its stars going on these interviews and ginning up publicity for the movie. So then we get to the civil rights complaint. Again, not a lawsuit yet, just a complaint, a private complaint. But even though it's a private complaint, the New York Times the very next day wrote a profile on Blake Lively and this alleged sexual harassment from Justin Baldoni, and they knew all the details that were inside the civil rights complaint. Now, the only place they could have gotten that, of course, is Blake Lively or Blake Lively's team or somebody who knows Blake Lively. This is not something that's on public record. And New York Times did not provide the full context of these complaints. They published text messages of Justin Baldoni's publicist saying, we can bury anyone, insinuating that these videos that we're talking about, casting Blake Lively in a bad light, were a concerted effort, a publicity stunt from Justin Baldoni to try to smear Blake Lively's reputation. And so the New York Times published a text message in which Justin Baldoni's publicist said, we can bury anyone. And they're like, the New York Times is like, smoking gun. That means that this is all Justin Baldoni, the alleged sexual harasser, trying to smear Blake Lively because she's exposing that he allegedly committed sexual harassment against her. Well, the problem is that the New York Times did not include any of the context of those text messages. In fact, they did such a poor job providing context that Justin Baldoni is suing the New York Times for libel. He's saying it is only willful negligence that could have, and this is a paraphrase, of course. He's saying this lawsuit is essentially saying it's only willful negligence to include the context and the truth that could lead you to publish something like this that doesn't include any of the details of what actually happened. Justin Baldoni, of course, is denying that he committed any kind of sexual harassment against Blake Lively. And he is saying, release all of the text messages between us. And then he filed a lawsuit against Blake Lively and her husband, Ryan Reynolds, for defamation, saying that they are, in fact, trying to smear his character by alleging that he committed sexual assaults against her. But here's where it gets interesting. And let me tell you where I started to get interested in this story, because you might be following along thinking, okay, Liz, this is kind of convoluted. This is Hollywood drama. Who really cares? Well, think of those 5 allegations that I mentioned before that Blake Lively is accusing Justin Baldoni of committing, of coming into her trailer while she was breastfeeding without being invited. Well, it turns out, and Justin Baldoni his lawyer released text messages showing that actually Blake Lively, while she was pumping in her trailer, invited Justin Baldoni to come in and run lines. So that's a lie. That the pornography on the cell phone allegation, actually, that wasn't pornography. It was the assistant director showing Blake Lively a video of a home birth that his wife had given birth at home. He was showing her that video because there's a birth scene in this movie and they wanted it to have home birth vibes. Perhaps, who knows? Blake Lively didn't seem to be familiar with home birth vibes, very different vibes than a hospital birth or a medicated birth. He was showing her this video so that she could see what they wanted from the scene. That's not pornography. So, the second lie about her weight. Did Justin Baldoni make negative comments about her weight? Was he body shaming her for being postpartum? Well, he has a herniated disc in his back and a torn meniscus. And I have a sister. This is me talking. I have a sister who is a professional ballroom dancer who does cabaret and acrobatics. And let me tell you, if her weight changes by even half a pound, it completely changes what stunts that they are able to do. That she and her partner were able to do when they were competing and performing all over the world. So for a man who is not a professional with a herniated disc and a torn meniscus to say, I need to know how much you weigh so that I can make sure that I don't hurt myself, especially because I'm injured. This is not body shaming. Not body shaming at all. And if he called her trainer to talk about her weight, maybe he was trying to shield her. I'm not coming to his defense. I have no idea if he's a good person or not. I'm on nobody's side here. But it seems to me that that's the third lie that Blake Lively told. And then when it comes to him riffing in sex scenes, her allegation is that there was a scene that he ad-libbed sniffing her neck and said, "Oh, you smell so good," or something to that effect. But she said there was no audio in the scene. It was just B-roll. So he didn't need to say anything. But correct me if I'm wrong, but in scenes where there's no audio, you can still see people's mouths moving, right? And actors riff all the time. And she was offered an intimacy coordinator. By the way, if you don't know what an intimacy coordinator is in Hollywood, there's a law that if there's a sex scene, there has to be an intimacy coordinator to make sure that everyone consents and is comfortable. It's so Hollywood, right? And she was offered an intimacy coordinator and she declined an intimacy coordinator. So that's lie number 4 and 5. And then, perhaps smarmiest of all, she alleges that Justin Baldoni made advances on an underage character in the movie. This is essentially accusing him of like pedo vibes, right? But what she didn't mention, or how she strategically used that term, made you think that he did something weird to a child. But underage character, well, the actor that played this character, the young version of her character, the actor that played the underage character was not underage. The actor herself is 23 years old, a full-grown adult woman. And so now all these allegations that Blake Lively is throwing against Justin Baldoni, they're lies. Blake Lively's lying. The question, of course, is why? Why would Blake Lively lie? Now, there are all kinds of theories about why Blake Lively would lie. Candace Owens has a source that says that, well, it's actually because of jealousy. Ryan Reynolds was watching the dailies, which is the daily raw footage of all the takes, all the scenes that they filmed, and he was watching the sex scenes. And after he watched the sex scenes, he and Blake had a fight in Blake's trailer, and somebody who worked on the set overheard the fight. And Ryan was jealous. This is according to some source of Candace Owens. And then it was Ryan Reynolds who threatened WME, which is the management firm that manages Justin Baldoni. And he said, if you don't drop him, me and Blake Lively and all our friends like Taylor Swift, we're going to quit you. And so this WME had no choice but to drop Justin Baldoni. So you might be asking, why does all of this matter? What does all of this mean? Let me tell you why this matters. Because if the New York Times is willing to participate in just such a plot, if Blake Lively is lying, and one of the ways to tell if someone's lying is who's hiding information and who is asking for full transparency. It's Justin Baldoni that's saying, I'll release all the text messages. I'll release all the communications. I'll release everything. And it's Blake Lively that's provably lying. If the New York Times is willing to get involved in a Hollywood matter where a woman makes a false allegation against a man and the man's reputation and life and career is ruined, then this means we are an inch away from this playbook being used in politics. It's essentially a trial run for this playbook being used in politics. If it's used in politics, then it can be used in our culture, which means that any one of us, if you're a man, it could be used against you. If you're a woman, it could be used against your husband, your brother, your son, your dad. This is Brett Kavanaugh all over again. Believe the woman. Hashtag me too. Believe her. And the man is deprived of all due process under the law. His life is obliterated. Now, again, I don't know if Justin Baldoni is a good person or a bad person. I don't know any of these people. I think all people in Hollywood are weirdos, but I will not sit here, even if this is in Hollywood, and watch a woman lie and falsely accuse a man, that man suffer deprivation of due process under the law and have everything in his life taken from him and his reputation forever in tatters. Because what? Some bratty actress made allegations against him? So put a pin in this, even if you don't care about Hollywood, put a pin in this and make sure that as this continues to unfold and that as this playbook is exported to politics, make sure that the first question we always ask in these cases is who's telling the truth and who's lying, who is asking for full transparency and who's being secretive, and is every party afforded their right of due process under the law, or are we allowing smear merchants to harm men simply because our culture has been indoctrinated in the Me Too movement? I think Blake Lively is lying. All right. And you thought Hollywood didn't matter? You thought this was just a bunch of gossip coming out of California and a bunch of actresses and actors getting into it with each other? Getting into it with each other. We will see. We will see. Mark my words on this one. All right, guys, that's all the time we have for today, but make sure you tune in tomorrow because this week the news is not going to slow down. Make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/Liz Wheeler, x.com/Liz_Wheeler on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. Leave me a 5-star review. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.